G'day everybody. I'm going through 439 contradictions in the Bible. I'm a Christian. I should be scared for doing this, but I am finding it way more deeper and more of a Bible study. But I want to investigate this because there is one here, 439 of these contradictions, but each one of those crosses is the same thing over and over and over again. And I feel like whoever put this list together, I think they say they're atheists, but whoever they are, it feels like they're kind of pumping up the numbers. And I want to go through this, and I want to go through the 439 every single week, one a week, but I don't want to do this video over and over again. So I'm going to do this one video once and for all. My name is Craig and this is Morning Star Quest, where we are journeying through the Bible one question at a time. And this is my friend Cosmo, who seems a little bit faster today, but that's okay. We'll go with it.
Hey everyone, excited to join Craig as we unpack these questions and see what's really going on.
I definitely am too. So, okay, so let's just get these things away and we'll put this on. So yeah, so how many of Asaph's offspring return from Babylon? Now, this is a question, I think if you have answered this once, you've answered 1,000 times. Yet, if I just take away this here, you can see number 34, how many of Ara's offspring returned from Babylon? 38, how many of Asaph's offspring returned from Babylon? 43, how many of Azgad's offspring? 46, how many of Barney's offspring? These are all the same question, the same part of the Bible. There is no, I mean, if you've answered one, you've answered them all. And it's one contradiction that should be questioned here, not the full 17, because it just feels like someone's just trying to puff up the numbers. But on the same side, you might think, well, okay, we need to answer every single one of these as because they are individual contradictions.
Right. Even if they look the same, addressing them individually can help uncover any subtle differences or contents that might be missed.
Exactly. So I am trying to, I've got so many things here. Apart from technical issues, let's get into this. So how many of Asaph's, and insert any name you like there that are in the Bible, because I think there's 17 here. How many did return from Babylon? Now, what is the problem here? Because in Ezra, there's two books in here. There's Ezra and there's Nehemiah. Both of these books, they show the same census, but there is a discrepancy. Now, if we can see here, descendants of Parosh. Now, this is just, I guess, it put into a spreadsheet because everybody loves spreadsheets.
Then spreadsheets are great for spotting patterns. Comparing those numbers side by side really helps highlight the differences and where those discrepancies might come from.
I totally agree. And all the ones in green here, they're fine. Like descendants of Parosh, don't ask me to say all of them. Over here, it's a 0. So there's 0 differences between the two. So Ezra did a census, Nehemiah put down the same census, and unfortunately for the descendants of Ara, there's 123 less people the second census.
Right, and that's where digging into context becomes crucial. Exploring reasons like timing, different scribes, or historical factors can shed light on those differences.
Now, a lot of people say that the descendants of Zatu, I'm sure that's one of them. Haven't gone through this whole list to see which ones are what, but 949 when Ezra did it, Nehemiah did the same census, 845. That's minus 100 people. Then you get down to descendants of Azgad. Look, I think if you answer the Azgad one, you've answered them all. The first census, 1,222. Then we have 2,322. 1,100 extra people that weren't accounted for. Shouldn't these be the same?
It's a great question. Those variations could be due to different records being used, changes in population over time, or even how each author chose to compile the data.
But people are saying this is a contradiction. Come on, it's got to be a contradiction, sure.
It might look like one on the surface, but exploring context often reveals explanations, like different sources or purposes for the lists.
So what would this be like, if you're turning up to a barbecue or something and you put down a list of so many people, but then 1,000 people turn up?
That'd be quite the surprise. It's like expecting a small gathering and suddenly having a whole crowd show up. Definitely raises some questions.
And we probably wouldn't have enough snags. So, all right. And speaking of snags, is this a snag? I mean, people are saying this is a contradiction. And we've got here all the ones in orange. They're the ones that aren't matching. I mean, obviously there's a lot of green ones here that are, they're perfectly matched each time. But a lot of them, the orange ones, they are not matching.
And those mismatches often become a focal point. It's about digging deeper to understand why those differences exist, rather than assuming a contradiction right away.
All right. So, let's go back to who is Ezra?
Great idea. Ezra was a priest and scribe who played a key role in the return from exile and reestablishing the law. His perspective might differ from Nehemiah's, which is something to keep in mind.
And I guess the thing is here, the people of Israel had been taken out of their land to Babylon. 70 years later, the Persian king came in, changed everything, and said people can go back home. Is Ezra part of that?
Exactly. Ezra was instrumental in that return. He not only led a group back, but also focused on reestablishing the law and spiritual life in Jerusalem.
Okay. All right. Who is Nehemiah?
Nehemiah, on the other hand, was a cupbearer to the Persian king. He returned to rebuild Jerusalem's walls and was more focused on the city's physical and social restoration.
And politically, who is Ezra and Nehemiah? Like, are they just journeying back because they feel it's like a right that they have and they should do? Or is there a bit more political stuff happening?
There's definitely a political layer. Ezra's role included restoring religious practices, while Nehemiah had a mandate from the Persian king to rebuild the city's defenses. Both were acting within the political climate of the time and with the king's support.
And I mean, what's happening outside of the Persian Empire? Obviously, if it's reinforcing things in Jerusalem, it's feeling a bit of a threat from somewhere.
Exactly. The Persian Empire was massive, and maintaining control over regions like Jerusalem was strategic. Reinforcing defenses helped guard against external threats and internal rebellions.
And so it was in their best interest for sending Ezra and Nehemiah, not just for their own purposes, but for the purposes of Persia. Was that in their best interest?
Absolutely. Sending trusted leaders like Ezra and Nehemiah ensured stability in Jerusalem, which was beneficial for maintaining peace and loyalty within the empire.
And this wasn't just for the Israelites, was it? This was across the board with different nations and all the sorts.
Exactly. The Persian strategy often involved allowing various regions to maintain their customs and leadership under Persian oversight. It was a way to keep things running smoothly and minimize conflict.
And I would say that there is a point to, I mean, obviously they're doing a census to see who has travelled back and who has stayed back in Babylon, I guess. But is there a more political reason for why these censuses exist in the first place?
There definitely could be. Censuses helped the Persian administration keep track of populations, resources, and potential military strength. It was a practical tool for governance and control across the empire.
And tax, I'm assuming. It's always tax.
Oh, definitely. Taxes were a big part of it. Knowing who was there and their resources helped ensure everyone contributed their share.
So you think that the fact that the Persian government wanted a tax, they wanted to make a census, so it kind of forced Ezra and Nehemiah to kind of, well, not force, but encourage them to do it. And then this became part of the Bible because it was a good thing for the Bible.
Exactly. It served both a practical purpose for the empire and a spiritual and historical purpose for the Israelites. It made sense to record it all, which is how it ended up in the Bible.
All right, so these censuses...
And that blend of...
Sorry to interrupt there, but these censuses, I can't even say the word. How can I say it?
You can say censuses or population counts if that's easier.
population counts. Let's say that. All right, let's do that. All right, so I guess the thing
Perfect.
here is Ezra and Nehemiah, should their census, their population accounts, shouldn't they be the same?
Ideally, yes, but differences can arise from various factors like timing, sources, or even slight changes in who was present.
Okay, what's the difference between Ezra and Nehemiah in years?
The events in Ezra and Nehemiah are about a decade or so apart, depending on the specific sections. Ezra's return happened first, and Nehemiah's return and rebuilding efforts followed.
It's about 13 years, I think.
Yeah, around 13 years between Ezra's arrival and Nehemiah's.
The thing that gets me here is we do a census, I think it's every 4 years in Australia, is that right?
Yeah, Australia typically conducts a census every 5 years to keep data up to date.
And how often does America do that?
In the United States, the census is done every 10 years.
Okay, so a lot happens in 5 years, 10 years, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Populations shift, circumstances change, and records can vary quite a bit in that time.
And so why are we expecting, why are the people that have made this list, why are they suggesting that this is a problem when it's a census that was 13 years apart? And I want to just add that Ezra did his, and he did the full thing. He went through it. And then Nehemiah, 13 years later, did it all again. He didn't copy Ezra, or maybe he got influence from it, but he also added to it because he did another census completely different.
Exactly. The differences are understandable given the time gap, context, and intent behind each account. It's not necessarily a contradiction, just a reflection of different circumstances.
I just want to make a note that you're definitely sounding a lot faster at the moment, but that's okay. We're getting through stuff and that's all right. But you're sounding more like a chipmunk today, but that's okay.
I'll slow it down a notch. Glad we're making good progress, though.
So it's 13 years apart, and there's a lot of political stuff happening with taxes and all the rest. And so why are we assuming that on the surface or even underneath that this should even be the same? Because America does it every 10 years. We do it every 5. It's always going to be some things are the same, some things are not. And I find it really interesting, and this is really, really interesting. Down the bottom here, types of animals. There's no difference because I don't think Nehemiah probably really cared. So he just went, well, that's what the original one was. That's fine. And there probably wasn't any tax benefit for either one. And then when it came to, where is it? There was something about when Ezra did the census and he did the priestly family, there was something Nehemiah, I think I remember reading something, there was a reason for why his is the same.
Nehemiah might have relied on Ezra's record for certain details, especially for things like family lineages. Those would have been stable, and reusing that data made sense, especially if nothing significant had changed.
Okay, no, there was something else anyway with the priests and all the clergy.
Ah, yes, the priestly and Levitical families were crucial for temple service. Ensuring accuracy in those records was a priority, which might explain the consistency in those counts.
Yeah, okay. I'm not quite sure if there was something along those kind of lines. So basically, the priestly family was so tight-knit, they knew exactly who was who, so that's the same. Whereas the descendants of whoever, men of Bethel and Ai, it's going to change over 13 years.
Exactly. The priestly lines were meticulously tracked, while general population changes over a decade would naturally cause variation in accounts.
So people saying this is a contradiction, are they right or are they wrong?
It's more nuanced. What might appear as a contradiction often has reasonable explanations when you consider context, purpose, and historical details.
And it's context, isn't it? And saying these are the same. See, here's the thing. If these two lists, 13 years apart, were exactly the same, do you think this would still be on the list and saying, well, these are too perfect?
Possibly. Sometimes people look for inconsistencies, but even perfect matches might spark skepticism or different questions. Context always matters.
Exactly. So I think, well, It's not just that I think. I know that this is a done deal. This is not a contradiction. I've gone through it. All 17 of these contradictions have been busted. They're not the same census, so why should they be the same? They're individual and separate. So go do something awesome for God. Click on one of these, because we're going to delve into way more of these with the 439 contradictions. When we get to these in the future, I am going to say, watch this video, and then I'll say, watch that one, because that's worth watching. We're going to do way more. It's like a Bible study.